Good Friday. I'm Tobin. I work for County GIS, and we do have about 30 people. I'm not sure what all of them do, but we have a number that do basic data maintenance, things like street center lines, parcels, building footprints, impervious surface, all the things related to a place that keeps government running. We have a group that does mapping and data analysis. We have a group that does application development, and then we have a group that does strategic planning and programming support, which is really just me and another guy. And
Nice title.
thanks. And I tend to do technology stuff where it's either things we haven't done before, or it's something new, or it's critical infrastructure piece like our web service architecture or our database backend. That's kind of what I do. I'm a geographer who kind of pretends to be a software maker. So if you normally take your software development advice with a grain of salt, take anything I tell you with at least 2. The quality of life dashboard, I'm going to talk, by the way, this is the only slide I will subject you to. That's the link to the dashboard. That's a GitHub account that includes a lot of different projects, including this. You can download all the source code. That's my blog. That's my email address. If there's anything you think of later, you don't like talking in our groups, just email me anytime. This is our official Mecklenburg County GIS Twitter account. This is my Twitter account and my blog address. That's not Mecklenburg County, so there might be swearing there. Use your best judgment. Collect around 20-25 metrics, and that would be used for all kinds of different things. It'd be used for government planning. It'd be used for neighborhood activists, community groups. Had a lot of different uses. The deliverable for that was a PDF, which is kind of like nerd death. There's not a whole lot you can do with that. They did that every 2 years, and they did that 4 times, and this 5th time, they decided they're going to include all of Mecklenburg County, instead of just the city of Charlotte and the places that might someday soon be part of the city of Charlotte. And they changed from neighborhood statistical areas to neighborhood profile areas, or NPAs. There's nothing the government cannot turn into an acronym. There's about 464 of those, so it's a much finer grain of detail. And there's about 80 different metrics collected on neighborhoods now, including a lot that nobody in the country that we found have been able to get a hold of. And when they came to that, that's where I got involved. I got drugged to a meeting, which is the only way I go to meetings. And they said, we got this project that involves a bunch of different departments in the city and the county and UNCC, and we'll be working in small towns, and all the politics that involves, and we want you to build an application, and we have $0. So I, of course, said, yes, I want that. That sounds like a good project. So a week after that meeting, I gave them their first prototype, and that went on to become the Quality of Life Dashboard. Now, a couple things you should know about being a government tool like I am. There are things we do that's a little bit different than you might do otherwise. Like, well, a lot of you when you're building websites, you're probably building them to be kind of sticky. You want people to spend a lot of time on your site. You want them to have multiple page views. You want them to hang out there. You want your bounce rate to be really low. I'm just the opposite. I want to make my sites very greasy. Most people come to a government site, they are looking for one specific thing. They want to find that and get the hell off your site. And that's what I want to do. I want to have low page count, low page views. I want to have low time on site. I want a high bounce rate. I want them to find what they're looking for and then to go away. That's what you're trying to optimize for a government website, which is kind of different. The second thing, and this is probably the biggest challenge with government work, and it's summed up really well in this Dilbert comic, is that government builds some of the ugliest, bloatiest, slowest, least useful sites in the entire universe. It's like, sometimes it's like MySpace threw up. That's what we make. That's what we put out there. There's no MySpace workers in Greenwood. And it's not an intentional thing. People have the best of intentions. If you've done web development for any amount of time at all, you can tell a website that's been developed by a community just at a glance. By a committee, you can just smell it. It's like every hyperlink they could think of, they load it into a shotgun and they blasted it onto a page. And they say, good luck. And that's really, I become Dr. No in most of these meetings. We have this guy in accounting wants these 5 buttons. Can we throw it on there? No. No, you can't. And it's very hard to convince them that everything you put on a web page has cognitive weight. And if you put things on a page that the user doesn't use, you're making the experience worse. So, in some ways in the quality of life project, we succeeded in that. Some ways I didn't. I had to compromise a bit. They were very large committees. So those are the challenges of being a government. Now this is the dashboard. And it's basically, we designed this to be as simple as possible. All of the variables are divided into categories on the left. You can flip between them. Pick a different category, it changes the map, it changes the information around it, additional resource links. That's how you look at different metrics. Each one will have can have different color schemes and different breakouts, different categories. You can pick a particular neighborhood a number of different ways. You can try to have it find you, which is just using a geolocation API. Sometimes this works and sometimes it doesn't. I'm not very happy. You can do a search, and this is a search you'll find on a lot of the county websites. It's using some really horrendous code I wrote. It's basically doing a sound-alike search for addresses. This is the one spot we find people always faceplant, is entering a search to find out where they are. People know where they live, but they sometimes can't type it, and sometimes they'll think a road is the same as a street, is the same as an avenue. In an address database, those are very different things. So you can search for an address, you can search for place names, businesses, you can scroll through the county by Taco Bells. Any way you want to search. It'll search for parks, schools, roads, parcel IDs. It's just kind of an omnibox search that kind of auto-completes for them, so people don't have to type it in right. Once it finds a neighborhood that'll be selected, you'll see its average compared to the county average. And that's a bit different. When they used to do the NSAs, they would label neighborhoods as doing well or not doing so well, or in a danger spot. That became very unpopular because no one wants to live in an endangered neighborhood. So now we just put the county average and the neighborhood average and say, you decide whether you think that's good or not. Now the map is fully interactive. As you hover over a neighborhood, you'll get information about it. You can click a neighborhood to select it. You can change the opacity of the overlay, so you can see what's underneath it and kind of figure out where you are. And you are now experts in the quality of life dashboard. That's literally the 5-minute class we teach people on how to use this. Which is another weird thing, we actually have a class for this. I try to tell them, if you build a website that people need a class to be able to use, you've done something wrong. But they had to have a class. This is like 5 minutes and then I throw them out of my office. Now there's some more stuff to it. You can do a report, and this makes a PDF. You can select whatever metrics you want. And it'll run out and generate a PDF. I hate making PDFs. Making PDFs, it just sucks. I mean, it's just a whole lot of move to this exact point on this page and draw some crap there. It's terrible. But makes the nicest PDF report certainly I've ever made, because I hate them. The data. I was very big when we started saying this is going to be open data. We're going to give this data out in any format people want. Now, they didn't really understand that. Mecklenburg County is very new to the idea of open data, and it's still catching on, particularly for GIS. There's a very unfortunate part of the public records law that says with GIS data you can do cost recovery, meaning you can charge for data. It's a well-intentioned but terrible idea. It doesn't really make money. The idea that it makes money for government is really an accounting gimmick. It really costs just as much to support that infrastructure and take payments that you are making. And we lose so much value that we could generate by people having that data. So that's very big on, we're going to share this data. You can download it in a GIS format in Excel, KML, see the metadata. We also put it in Google Fusion tables. As people play around with Google Fusion tables, well, it's like that's really what it sounds like. It's kind of like Google Docs for more intensive data. You can see the data on there. You can make maps. You can make charts. You can upload your own data based on those neighborhoods and join it together and do analysis. One of the things as a government agency we have to be concerned about is we don't want to make products that everybody in the community can't use. And some folks might not have Excel. They might not have good desktop GIS, which can be very expensive, not using the open source stuff. By putting it in Fusion tables, they can go to the library, they can pull it up on a computer, they can use it like anyone else can. They can do their own analysis, they can make their own reports. So that's why we put it there. Now, it's a responsive design. I'm not a big believer in making applications twice. I usually don't like to make them once. So it's all HTML5, and it's a responsive design. As you go down, it'll shrink the content, eventually go to one column for a phone. You'll notice this big sidebar, which I never really liked, will go down into a Dropbox, which makes a lot more sense. When I first did this, I put all this stuff just in a Dropbox, but found out that that's kind of like hidden stuff for a lot of our citizens. It's in a Dropbox, they can't see it until they click on that Dropbox. And a lot of people that look at it, we're doing usability testing, say, I can't find the metrics because you can't see them. That's why on the default page, they're all there on the side. And that is really it in a nutshell. A little bit, I'll tell you how it's built and what it's using. You might notice from the top it's using history API to track state. So you can send people a link and it'll go straight to that neighborhood and that metric. From the bottom to the top, it's HTML5 boilerplate. You probably recognize a lot of the widgets as Twitter Bootstrap for the user interface with 2 bits of jQuery UI, the slider bar, and the autocomplete, because it's just a lot better than Bootstrap's suggest box right now. It's using jQuery, of course. It uses Modernizer for HTML5 Shiv and basically detect whether the browser supports geolocation or not. If it doesn't, it'll hide that Find Me button. For the mapping, it uses a library called Leaflet. And Leaflet is pretty new, and it's HTML5 mapping library that will revert back to non-HTML5 stuff for old versions of Internet Explorer. It's very small, it's very fast, and it's a very nice library. If you're looking to do new mapping stuff, Leaflet is really, really nice. I've used a dozen different JavaScript mapping libraries. Leaflet's probably the nicest one I've used. Now the data itself, this application is almost entirely client-side. The only things that touch the server are the search and the PDF report. Everything else comes from the client. The data is loaded from a GeoJSON file. GeoJSON is just a JSON file in a particular schema to hold geographic information. So the all these polygons with all the data associated with it, those 80 metrics, gzipped over the network is about 120 kilobytes. So that data loads once. When the page loads, it gets cached, and you never have to load it again. The metadata is in just another JSON file, and it's loaded once at runtime too. So it is very, very lightweight on the server. We could throw this on a $5 a month GoDaddy site, and it would run just fine. So it's a very, very lightweight application. That's basically how it's built. The responsiveness you saw is generally just Bootstrap the responsive stuff in Bootstrap, they have that separate responsive CSS file. And that is how it's built. The whole process to build it took around 200 hours, start to finish. If you include all of the meetings associated with that project, it'd be more like a better part of my life for the last year. But in terms of actual development time, it went together very, very quickly. And that is the quality of life dashboard. Now, all this code, we not only share the data, the code is out on GitHub, and you can take it and download it. And again, I'm a geographer pretending to be a software engineer, so please, if you see anything that could be better, submit a patch, send me an email, do something. I'd be really glad to hear it. So I'm really interested in your folks' feedback on the site because you are much better at this stuff than I am. Now using guard woot, you see I write very helpful check-in messages on GitHub. So that is Quality of Life Dashboard. When they said they wanted to talk about that, you go, boy, that's not going to take up an hour. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about the software we use and why we use it. I'm a big open source software proponent. Every organization has at least one pain in the ass hippie. In Mecklenburg County, that's me. That started out about maybe 10, 12 years ago. And the reason was we had this crashware turd of a web map server. We had spent a ton of money on it, and they made this new site, and they put it in the Charlotte Observer. Come by Monday, the site's going to be great. There'll be unicorns and rainbows and fantastic. And of course, when they got there, all they got was a server unavailable message. And that went on for weeks, and we just could not get the software to work. We brought the vendor in to get the official shrug. Oh. We threw it on faster hardware, and it would actually fail faster. So, fortunately, that wasn't one of my projects, but I had some stuff coming down the pipe, and I was not going to be using that stuff. That was very expensive proprietary software. So I started looking around thinking I'm going to write somebody a check. That's when I ran into University of Minnesota's map server. Map server is an open source map server. Basically, it acts like a service. You send it requests, it gives you a map. And I installed that. It was easier to install than the proprietary stuff. It was faster, and it never ever broke. And that was really my first experience with open source software. And since then, I tried open source for everything. At Mecklenburg County, we're a 100% Windows shop. At home, I'm a 100% Linux shop, and I split time between home office and the work office. So all the software where I use is generally cross-platform. Linux Mint, Debian, Linux Mint, KDE, if anyone cares. So we're running out. The latest OpenSUSE looks pretty cool. So that's how I got into open source software. And when we started with open source software, it wasn't because we didn't have money. People always cite cost when they talk open source software. It wasn't that. We had money. We didn't think we did at the time. Then the last few years, we realized, boy, did we have a lot of money then. It was really because for most use cases, it was just better. That's why we started using it. Now, on the back end, our main database that houses on the open source side, our spatial data is Postgres. And I've done geographer pretending to be DBA for SQL Server and MySQL and pre-Oracle MySQL too. And Postgres. And Postgres by far has been the most pleasant experience. It scales very linearly. It's very predictable. The worst thing about Postgres is you'll forget it's there. You still got to do all that good DBA stuff like checking your logs and making sure everything's running and the backups are running. You'll just have to remind yourself of that because it just keeps running. SQL Server will let you know every now and again that you really should be paying attention to what it's doing. Now, PostGIS is a, should show you this poster a little bit. I probably can't read any of that there. That's made in Inkscape, by the way. PostGIS is an extension for Postgres that gives it spatial functionality. It adds a spatial data type for vector and raster. Vector being, if I ever start talking inside baseball, GIS terms or government terms, please just raise your hand and ask me anything. Vector is basically a description of an object, like the coordinates of a square. Raster is a pixel by pixel, what color are you going to color to this particular square? What data do you want behind it? It has spatial data types for vector raster and does all kinds of advanced spatial analysis. You can do buffers and overlays and vector and raster overlays and clipping and unions and all kinds of really advanced stuff. It is by far the best spatial database extension out there. The most capable and the testing I've seen the fastest. We're very, very happy with it. So we use that primarily and SQLite if it's just little stuff. For the database backend, I actually wrote down some notes here to make sure I don't forget. I'm getting old. And again, we're a Windows shop, so it's Windows Server, which makes me sad sometimes. But one of the reasons I do cross-platform stuff is I'm hoping it won't always be Windows Server. I should say, too, that in terms of developing projects, I tend to fall into the Agile camp without having a specific Agile technique. Most of our projects are single-person things. Designer, developer, project manager, blame is generally all right here. And you really can't have a stand-up Scrum meeting by yourself. So I'm into Agile philosophy without a particular Agile technique we use. We don't use Scrum or Kanban. Is that what you call it? Kanban. But in terms of iterating quickly and getting things out there with the customer and valuing people over processes and that kind of thing, that's really where I'm at. So that's how I develop software. That's why we had that first meeting and I got voluntold I'd be working on this project. A week after that, they had a prototype in their hands they could look at. Didn't do a whole lot, but it's something they could look at and start getting feedback from. In terms of editors, your text editor is a very personal thing. So I'm not going to tell you what the right answer is there, but the right answer is Sublime Text 2. It's really, really good. They've got 3 out in beta now that I haven't tried. I use Sublime Text 2 for a text editor. I use, in terms of getting started, it's generally HTML5 boilerplate. I really like Bootstrap, their JavaScript and their CSS. I used to use jQuery UI a lot. Now I just use little bits of it here and there when I need to. Use Modernizer on everything, if for no other reason than it just shoves HTML5 shiv in there for you. Because we have to support some old versions of Internet Explorer. In terms of technology, we have a lot of government workers and a lot of people at banks, and technologically that's kind of like Amish plus plus. So we support old versions of Internet Explorer up to version 8 now. We no longer support 7. That was a tough battle, but finally I had to say, I mean, that was 2006. There's Pluto was still a planet in 2006. We can't be supporting that. In terms of GIS, we are a mixed shop. We use software from a company called ESRI, which has offices all over the world. They have an office in Charlotte. It's very good, very expensive software. We also use open source software. We use PostGIS on the back end for our map server. And a map server is the thing that shells out maps for websites on the web. It's basically kind of like a web service. You send it. give me a map with these layers styled this way for this particular area, and it sends you back an image or it sends you back vector data. For that, we use something called GeoServer. GeoServer is it's Java. It'll run in Jetty or Tomcat. We're running it in Jetty for no particular reason. It was just faster. It's very, very good. For your base tiles. Base tiles are the maps you put down that you overlay all the other stuff on top of. Base tiles are like, it's like this stuff down here below the color. Base tiles, we use something called TileMill, which is a very new product. TileMill is, it uses Node and it styles with, the styling is kind of CSS. They're using less or SAS on the back end, I can't remember which. Where you use that kind of CSS sort of to style a map. So it's a very familiar, if you do web development, way to style a map. And it is crazy fast. Our proprietary software will do a base map for Mecklenburg County in 8 or 9 hours. TileMill, and that's on a beefy server. TileMill will do it on this laptop in 15 minutes, and the cartography is better. TileMill is really, really nice for base maps. For web services, for geoprocessing, we use a framework that we put together ourselves. It's basically just a very simple wrapper around Postgres and PostGIS. And you can find that code on Github as well. There's a lot of people using that. One of the things that's I've had limited success with at the county, which I wish we'd do more of, is sharing our code back to the community as open source software. And I try to share back all the projects I do that I think would be of any interest to anyone. I've got a number of projects out there now. Most government developers don't. And it's the same reason why a lot of developers don't. One, it just sounds like a hassle to them. It's like, now I have to support the entire world. That's great. And the other reason is all developers kind of secretly think they suck. I mean, they just think they're terrible developers. And people are going to see my code and they'll laugh and laugh. And I've shared a lot of project out there now, and neither of those things are true. People are very respectful of your time. They'll say, hey, I'm trying to use your software and doing this. Whenever you can get back to them, they'll be very, very happy about it. I've never once got any kind of, I mean, I've gotten some good feedback, say like, you know that 30 lines of code there, you should probably just, put in these 3 characters and go on with your life. I get stuff like that, but it's all very polite. I've never had a bad experience open sourcing that code. I think it's especially important for government because, for one thing, you paid for that code. You should be able to see it. And the second reason is it wastes untold amount of money not open sourcing that code. Mecklenburg County has software it uses for like Department of Social Services, run the jails, Sheriff's Office, stormwater software. It's written. Every other county, Mecklenburg County, has the exact same software they wrote, doing pretty much the exact same stuff. That is just a huge waste of time and money. So, I'm a very big proponent of getting people to open source the county. I've had limited success. Limited, I mean, I'm the only one I know of that does that in Mecklenburg County right now. But these things happen slowly, especially at counties are government's very risk averse and changes very slowly. But hopefully in the next 5 or 10 years we'll see that changing. That's why I share code, and please take a look at it, use it, and send me patches, because as I say again, I am not a software developer. I started software development because I'm just damaged enough to think that's kind of fun. Software development is hard, unbelievably hard. Complex software for a big system is one of the most complicated things human beings do. And it has to be perfect. It has to be perfect even in imperfect conditions. We're not good at perfect as humans. Software development is very, very hard. So I thank all of you people doing software development, one, good on you, and two, we're all just very damaged people. I think this is a lot of fun. Now, I want to talk a little bit about some things that are coming up for GIS and mapping on the web. It's a very exciting time. There were still people doing GIS mapping, still doing now, unfortunately, stuff in Flash and Silverlight. That is fortunately starting to go away. Forget about the fact that Microsoft and Adobe are running from these platforms so fast, it's like the rear ends are on fire. In the next 2 years, Gartner and whatever analyst you care to believe that particular day, more than half of the visitors to a typical website are going to be on stuff like this. They're not going to be on desktops. Flash and Silverlight don't work here. They probably never will. So, Flash and Silverlight going away, that's good. The big things in HTML5 for mapping, I would say, are Canvas, for one. Right now, most web maps are still just kind of like an endless pile of divs. I mean, if you ever right-click on a Google map, and it's just like, it's like one of those M.C. Escher paintings where it's just on and on forever. Just an endless stack of divs. With Canvas, we can start doing some really interesting stuff. We can do some stuff that, for performance reasons, we just couldn't before. So that renders as a low-level bitmap, and it is very, very fast. WebGL 2 is going to be very big for specialized uses, like for LiDAR and 3D type stuff. And good news, it looks like Microsoft might start supporting WebGL. They've got some basic WebGL hooks in IE 11 on Windows Blue, or whatever they're calling it. So hopefully, at one time Microsoft was very anti-WebGL. They said it was a big security risk, and it's kind of good they're worried about security now. But hopefully that will catch on with Internet Explorer and we start doing some really neat stuff in WebGL. Another big thing in HTML5, which really isn't here yet, which will be big, is web workers. Web worker is kind of like a background JavaScript process. A lot of the things we do in GIS on the web are very JavaScript intensive, and every device now, even phones, are coming with 2, 3, 4 processors. When something's going on in JavaScript, it ties up the whole user interface. The background process, you'll be able to shuttle that off, and people can still keep using the interface fine. That'll be very, very big. Another thing that's going on right now in GIS is it used to be all raster driven. You're basically sending out pings and JPEGs. And maybe you'd stick a marker on a map, and that would be your one vector feature. Now, it's becoming much cooler to use vectors. Internet Explorer 9 and 10 support SVG now, at least parts of it, which is very good. And you can send out vector features. If this was a raster, it would not be an interactive experience. You wouldn't be able to hover over and get information. You wouldn't be able to click on things. It would just be a flat image. As a vector, you can start doing interesting things with it. The big vector formats for GIS are KML, which is an XML format, which is, XML is kind of wordy and no fun. GeoJSON, which is what this uses, which is a JavaScript, just a schema of JSON, if you will. And there's a new format called TopoJSON. And TopoJSON doesn't have a whole lot of support yet. D3 supports it. Has anybody messed around with D3 visualization library? Awesome. Awesome. TopoJSON does something neat. The big thing with vectors is you want to get the size down. And in GeoJSON, if 2 polygons are adjacent, so they share a side, that description of that line gets stored twice. In TopoJSON, Topo stands for topological relationships, which is rubber sheet geometry, which is math we just don't need to talk about. But when those 2 polygons are stored adjacently, that common line is stored once. That means a polygon layer can be 75–80% smaller using TopoJSON. And you can do interesting things. Since that's a topological relationship, you can do things like change the projection of the map to make it look different, and all those polygons will move together because they have a relationship in the data together. So vectors are going to be a really big thing. And I think there's one other thing I want to share with you about that. Okay, crowdsourcing for government is going to become a thing. We're getting too much data and too few people to do this stuff ourselves. Has anybody heard of OpenStreetmap? OpenStreetmap, think of it like Wikipedia for GIS data. It's not just streets, they store all kinds of stuff in there. And you can, with your phone, with a GPS device, download some software, walk a road somewhere in Charlotte, or a greenway or a trail, and capture that information, put an OpenStreetmap, and the whole world can use it. OpenStreetmap is just a brilliant, fantastic project. They have a lot of OpenStreetmap humanitarian missions. When the earthquake happened in Haiti, when you look at Google Map and OpenStreetmap, right when it happened, you'd see a whole town with like one line through it, the main road, and no other information at all. Within 24 hours of that earthquake, you pull up OpenStreetmap, and it looks like, you know, Rand McNally Atlas. They put in all the streets, they put in where the shelters were, where to go help, where to get food, where to get water. They probably save lives. So they do really good humanitarian work with OpenStreetmap. So crowdsourcing is going to be a big thing. The only thing I've done with that so far, and I've been able to do that because nobody knows I did it, I find that's the easiest way to get things done in government, is we have house photos in our database, which they collected like 8 years ago. And they generally collect them leaf off because they were for appraisers, which means everybody's yard looks like crap. So if you're selling your house and you've done some improvements, or you want it to look differently, that wasn't very happy. So they saw that and said, well, we're just going to have to yank all the photos down because we can't afford to go get new ones. So I said, what I'll do instead is I'll let people submit their own photos and put them on there, and a few hundred people so far have. So we're going to be crowdsourcing more and more information and collecting from citizens. Part of it because we're broke, and part of it because you guys know stuff, in a lot of cases, a lot better than we do. Some of it we will have to make authoritative, like it would be a hard sell to put OpenStreetmap directly in your 911 center, because if I'm a smart bank robber, I might erase the road that bank's on in OpenStreetmap right before I go rob it. So there's still a matter of making sure that data is authoritative. Crowdsourcing is going to be a big thing. That means you're all going to be doing free work for us. Thank you very much.
We got about 15 minutes for questions or so.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's a good place to stop anyway. We're doing mobile first, which I'm sure you guys are all doing now. If you're looking to get into GIS as a career, I don't think GIS as a career is going to be around a whole lot longer. GIS, when I started, was a very specialized, we were the people with the sun spark stations in the corner nobody wanted to talk to kind of thing. Now it is really commoditized. People do GIS and don't even realize they're doing GIS. And that's really the way it should be. That's going to make the whole process move forward. If I was starting out now to be a GIS person, I would minor in geography and major in computer science or design as much. All right. Guess we have time for questions? Yes, sir.
You said something at the beginning of your talk that I wanted to ask you about just for personal reasons, which was that you tried a number of different frameworks in addition to Leaflet. And right now I'm working on a project that has OpenLayers, and I've been looking at Leaflet thinking, gee, maybe I should invest the time to switch to that. So I was curious to hear your take on, I assume OpenLayers was one, your take on the difference in performance and ease of use, et cetera, between OpenLayers and Leaflet.
OpenLayers is another open source JavaScript library. We do use it for some projects too. It is a much more full-featured library. It has editing toolbars and all kinds of crazy stuff you can do with it. It is also quite a lot bigger and heavier library, and it's been around a long time too. And it's the first one there tends to suffer because the other ones learn from all the stuff you did. There's a lot of cruft in using OpenLayers where one line in Leaflet might be 10 lines of JavaScript in OpenLayers. You have to figure out, right? There's nothing wrong with OpenLayers. You should definitely, there's an OpenLayers build module, so you can build just the parts of it you want to get that size down. I think OpenLayers is like, the whole library is like 700 or 800 kilobytes for the latest version, I'm not saying, which is a lot. Leaflet, gzipped over the network, I think is like 25 kilobytes. So, right now I do Leaflet first, and if Leaflet can't handle the functionality application, I'll go to OpenLayers. It's basically how I approach it. You're not going to go wrong either way.
So, sorry I came in late, and I might have missed something, but on your overflight pictures that you do, like for Polaris or whatever, how do you do the registration to like the other layers, like the property lines and things like that? And how close can you get them?
They are it depends on the year. The horizontal accuracy is generally less than a foot for horizontal accuracy. When they fly it with some very high-end GPS equipment, and they also tie it to registration marks that are all over the county. So, I mean, we outsource all that. No one gives us airplanes, unfortunately. So when it comes to us, it's already registered and everything's good. What they do is, when they're flying in the plane, and now they shoot not only straight down, they'll also shoot at an angle for oblique photography, and capture LiDAR at the same time. LiDAR is basically laser imaging, so you get a point cloud. LiDAR data, dealing with that, it's just, it's so, that's big data, big data. So when they fly it, it's actually captured right then, and then they will register the images to each other, edge match them, so there'll be overlap. When they deliver a product, it's all good for us. So we never actually have to worry about that part. But it's part GPS, and it's part, there are monument registration points throughout the county that they'll match up with as well.
So you mentioned you're trying to open this data up. Do you have any, are you trying to have any association with data.gov at kind of the federal level, or do we have to stick it kind of at the county level at this point?
We don't have association with data.gov, and they're not really looking for that kind of, they're not really looking for counties to join out right now that I know of. There's also NC1Map, which is like a North Carolina database repository. So we're now looking to join the National Spatial Data Infrastructure is kind of what they call it. And I'm not sure we've really been invited to. A lot of that stuff is still local, unless it's federal level data. I threw out a really quick open data portal using just Jekyll, and threw out some basic data layers. Unfortunately, Mecklenburg County is still selling some of its big data sets. And that's a battle I've not been able to win yet. So we're not participating at the national level, we're participating at the state level with NC1Map. And I'm hoping to sometime this year get around to getting a proper open data portal. There's several that have been made open source, CCAN, and one OpenPhilly uses as an open source framework. That one's on Django, I think. I've been looking for an excuse to learn Django. Finally give me one. Hopefully I'll do that and throw it on OpenShift or something. Get it. I've decided lately that servers suck, and I'd really like to just start getting stuff out. I mean, if you're a sysadmin, you do great stuff. Any sysadmins are in, but we're probably going to start looking at things like OpenShift and VPS hosting when we need to for some of this stuff.
Specific to the quality of life study, what sort of case studies are you aware of where people have used this data or looked at it and then taken some sort of action? So what decisions have they made other than they were just curious about this data?
That's a good question. Well, this data is brand new, but I can tell you over the course of the study that Charlotte Neighborhood Development, Charlotte Neighborhood and Business Services will actually invest money into communities for different things. So it helps determine that. It's been used for grant applications. It's been used for it's been used for even recycling has used it. We've collected some recycling information this time. I know community activists have used it to pinpoint problems in neighborhoods and address them at the level they need to be addressed. Now, sometimes you'll see a neighborhood by itself that has a really high crime rate or really high this. If it's just that neighborhood, you might address it one way. If it's a whole group of neighborhoods clustered around an area, you might address it a different way. That's one of the reasons we wanted to add mapping to this site. When we looked at there are some products you can buy that do this, but none of them have mapping in it. We want to be able to show that spatial relationship with the information. So it's really used for a lot of different decisions. I could probably think of a lot more examples, but it's almost hard to find a decision government's making that involves the information that we capture that doesn't use a quality of life study.
I was curious, is there a connection between the work that the county is doing in private industry? For instance, it would be useful to be able to map this data against things like Time Warner broadband penetration, cable penetration. Are they using your architecture, or do you have access to their data? Do those things? Are there firewalls between those, the private and the public usage of this data?
Good question. The private industries are all using our data. They're a little less willing to give us their data, and there are good reasons for it. They're a competitive business. They don't want their competitors. We did manage to get some things that no one else has gotten, like let's see, where is it? Like natural gas consumption and energy consumption. It's kind of funny to get that data. We basically have to play companies against each other. You know, we'd be in with Duke Power and say, "Oh, you wouldn't believe the data Piedmont Natural Gas just gave us." They're like, "Really? We'll give you some data too." Of course, no one had given us any data. That water consumption, that was very hard to get, and nobody else in the country we know of was able to get that. It's very challenging to get that data from business, and there are a lot of good reasons why business wouldn't want to give up that data. So I can't entirely blame them. But they do definitely take a lot of data from the county.
Related to that question, I mean, it looks like a lot of this data comes from different sources and different, county and government and city, agencies. So how hard was it to get all of that data into the same format so it could all be displayed on this map and categorized by the neighborhood areas and stuff like that?
For me personally, it was very easy. UNCC did all of that. But yeah, that was really, when you look at this project, UNCC really did all the hard work. I mean, they really built the car. I just drive it around a little bit. And it was tough. The neighborhood profile areas are based on one or more census blocks. And that means they can pretty easily assimilate census data, especially stuff from the New American Survey data they got. Other data, they would have to sign agreements with, say, Duke Power to get the data as points, but then generalize them to neighborhoods, so people couldn't see specific people's information. Or in at least one case, we gave them the neighborhoods and they provided us the summarized data. So we would never have access to those customer locations. So it depends on the data. I don't think there was an instance where they had to do any weird math, like say they had data for a big area and small NPAs, and they had to do some kind of weighted size measurement to break that up. And we didn't do any of that just because that makes for some bad data. But fortunately, UNCC did all that hard work, which means there are some very tired, hungover graduate students somewhere as we speak.
And what's each one of the blocks represent? Is that a census group or?
These are the neighborhood profile areas. So each one is made up of one or more census blocks.
So do those stay fixed? Because like zip codes, their boundaries can change, right?
Yeah, they stay, usually they stay fixed. There can be some, they can change, but usually they stay fixed.
Why did you start and why did you continue to work in government?
Oh, gosh, I don't know. I started as an intern right out of college, so I basically never had a non-menial part-time job that wasn't this. It's really, if you want to do geographic GIS work at the county level, there's a lot of good stuff going on in North Carolina, but I mean, I'm biased, but I think Mecklenburg County is really the place to be. So in terms of the kinds of things I wanted to do with geography and GIS, it's a really good place to be. I did run private companies, you get kind of like retail location kind of stuff, and it just sounded boring to me. And one of the neat things about Mecklenburg County GIS is we're like an internal service department. So we work for all the other county departments. So one week you might be doing redistricting with the Board of Elections. Another week you might be doing plume modeling with air quality, or there might be a big rain event and you're helping out stormwater. So there's a broad diversity of work to do, which keeps it very interesting. And one of the nice things about GIS at the county is we were always kind of the weird geography kids in the corner, so we're usually left alone. Like, the kinds of tools I work with isn't typical of Mecklenburg County. Mecklenburg County is a big .NET SQL Server down the line kind of shop. But once we say, and there's GIS stuff, they just, I don't want to hear that. So that gives us some freedom to do that. Not anything we want, but use the best tool for the job rather than taking a .NET hammer and beating the crap out of everything that comes through the door. So, no, I've used .NET, it's fine. It's just not my thing. So that's really, it's been a really fun job. Last few years have been a little rough. We've actually lost some people due to budget cuts over the last few years, but it's still a fun place to work. Hey, in 13 more years.
Thank you, Tobin.